Is Deion Sanders potentially leaving the Big 12, good or bad for the Big 12 schools? We're talking about it on today's Locked On Utes and Locked On Texas Tech crossover.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube, wherever you may get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by the host of Locked On Texas Tech, Chris Levle. Chris, when you're talking about Deion Sanders, he has such a polarizing presence in this conference. And at first it didn't go great, right? Like last year, well, first year in the Big 12 now, but in the Pac-12 that first year, it did not go well. It clicked this year. And even though he's losing Travis and Shedeur now, they've got a 5-star coming in there. It still feels like there's momentum for them to kind of build a strong program. But now there's these rumors that come in that he may end up just going and taking the Cowboys job. I think him leaving is good for Utah, bad for the Big 12. How do you view this situation?
My man, JT, pleasure to be with you, sir. And I would tell you that it's going to be like Utah. It would be good for every school from a win-loss standpoint. However, it would be really bad for the business of the Big 12 and the relevancy of the Big 12. I think you're fighting for I think that's the right word. It's relevancy. Like what do people care about? And there's a care factor there because I think like so many things in sports, you mentioned the name Deion Sanders or Colorado with him as the head coach, and people have an opinion, some good, some bad, but they care. It matters. And so they tune in to root for, root against, or whatever. And I think that's the bottom line. You know, that circus came into Lubbock this year. They got the best of the Red Raiders. They were a really good team. And it just it didn't go well that particular day for Texas Tech. I mean, the big noon kickoff was here. And the whole thing. I mean, it was a fun environment. It just the final score didn't work out for the home team in Colorado. They took care of their business and moved on. But I grew up in the Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth area. I know a lot of people that cover the Cowboys and have known a lot of people that cover the Cowboys. And it's the team that I grew up following and paying attention to. There's a couple things with the Cowboys that fascinates me about this Deion Sanders thing.
Yep.
One, I believe that he would be owed a pretty hefty buyout, okay, because he's under contract, and there's some talk that he has a new contract on his desk. He just hasn't, the initial report came from a guy named Jordan Schultz, and it's since been backed up by a variety of other folks.
Schaffner, those guys.
Oh, yeah, and Ed Werder, and on and on it goes. And I think what's interesting to note initially that Jordan Schultz and Deion Sanders are repped by the same marketing firm. So you kind of connect some dots there and go, I do think it's good for everybody's brand if this is all out there. Jerry loves that.
Yep.
Yeah, and is Deion, would he potentially be angling for more money? Okay. So there's that part of it. But at the end of the day, didn't he himself say, I'm probably not going anywhere unless I can coach my kid? And that's a virtual impossibility with this setup with the Cowboys. So there's a lot of chatter. I mean, heck, even the betting odds at the time you and I are talking have Deion as the betting favorite to be the Cowboys head coach. Yes. And I refuse to believe that Jerry Jones would hire a bigger star than he is.
And he absolutely would be. There's not even a debate to it.
Yes. That would be because Jerry Jones, he's on the radio multiple times a week. He's like no other owner in sports, which drives me crazy. He talks, he has a press conference after every game at the same time that his head coach is doing one. So if you're a media member covering the team, you have to decide, okay, do I want to go listen to Mike McCarthy or Jerry Jones? Who's going to give me the juice? And the whole thing's bizarre. So I have a lot of doubts that is actually real. But to your point, you can place a wager on it. But okay, so then we skip back. I do think, though, that not that I'm rooting for one thing or the other, but it would not be great news for the Big 12 because I think, like you, we think that Colorado would probably go back to where they've been in the last 10 or 15 years, more than likely.
No, more. It's absolutely true. It is so funny. Like, even as soon as I just say the words Colorado football, it's amazing how differently just the meaning of those words now, like 3 years ago before Deion took over, like just all of the cachet, the swagger, everything, and even just like nearly making the Big 12 title game. Like, they built themselves into a conference contender this last year. And I think there's reason with some of the coaches and the recruiting and just the fact that it's really appealing to play for Deion Sanders, they can keep that up. I do agree he's going to end up staying. Like, we're just going, what's going to happen? I think he's going to end up staying at Colorado. Is this a leverage play? I think in part, but I do think like he's genuinely interested in the Cowboys. Chris, you make a great point about him wanting to coach his son. But if you were also to say, what's the one job he'd be willing to make an exception to that for? I do think it would be Dallas. And he would have to make an exception on his son, because you make the point it's impossible. Dak is owed like $104 million if they like try to cut him or trade him or whatever. Like, they're not getting rid of Dak Prescott, and they're not just going to have like Dak and Shador there together. So I totally agree with you. That's not going to happen. And that's where it really becomes an interesting angle then for, like, if we're just looking at it for the Big 12 members, like, what do we want? I do believe if you were going to tell me right now, you could genuinely argue the Big 12 school with the best chance to become the next Big 12 dynasty, I do believe it's Colorado. Now, could you say what Matt Campbell has built at Iowa State? Absolutely. But I just think the resources, and I think if you're also going to say this, like, who has the best chance to consistently develop Heisman winners? I do think we can both agree that falls to Colorado in the conference currently. So that's where I think they're set up to be really good going forward. And that's where it's positive. Maybe if you take a contender away, but there is value in just having your game seen and being noticed on a bigger level. And that's what losing Deion would take away from all the Big 12 schools.
Yeah, and it's I mean, valid points, and I do think Deion loved his time in Dallas. He stayed close. He lived in the Metroplex for many years, and actually coached some high school stuff in and around the Metroplex. He stayed tight with Jerry and all those things. But it'll be is Colorado on Utah's schedule next year?
I believe so.
Okay, they are. Okay, because the Red Raiders don't see them. And I guess there'll be a return trip to Boulder, next season in the 26th season. So it's not Colorado will be everybody else's problem as far as I'm concerned this next season. But they didn't splash with the portal like they have. And I do think there is some staying power there. There's relevancy power, certainly. And it's just going to come down to – because, I mean – odds are you're not ever going to have, like, say, 2 top 10 picks on the same football team at Colorado anymore, like, ever.
More than likely, yes. More than likely.
Those odds are extremely high. And until they get better on the offensive line, because I think that right now they'll be picked middle of the pack in the Big 12 as it stands, and I think that's a fair projection. But because there's this league is pretty tough. I mean, there's Iowa State.
We learned the hard way at Utah, Chris.
well, and I would say that I empathize with the Utah fan because for 10 to 12 years, Texas Tech has dealt with some level of quarterback injury. They just have, and there's. Matt Wells was the head coach here. Utah fans probably remember him. I was with him earlier this week up in Manhattan for a little bit. But, I mean, he had, I think, in his tenure here, I think they started like 9 or 10 different quarterbacks, and he wasn't here but about 3 years or whatever it was. So it's just but I get it. When you have QB problems, though, it doesn't matter what league you're in, you're going to struggle. But so I certainly empathize with the Ute fans out there. Although there was a lot of Utah fans out there who were going to come in this deal and run the thing. I know that. And you know that too.
Oh, there was. And I will say, most of what I talked about was like this year. I just looked at it in terms of how much veteran talent Utah had being this year. Like, I didn't think year in and year out Utah would be the top team. It's like every year they're going to steamroll everyone. I just thought that this last year, and with the schedule lining up as it had, I thought this was going to be their year, and it was most certainly.
And you
not.
have a phenomenal coach. Kyle Whittingham is one of the most respected guys in that part of the country in the sport, period. And I could certainly see why many felt pretty strong about, kind of like, I'm sure that the Arizona basketball fan probably feels pretty good about coming into this deal. It's like you had so much success. You've got history and tradition on your side, all this stuff. And anyway, but it's a bit different. There's some travel, and it's not a bunch of cupcakes. That's for sure.
No, absolutely not some cupcake. It's a brutal schedule, and we'll see if Coach Prime's presence keeps the football angle of it brutal. It's going to be fascinating to see what he decides to do. We both expect him to end up staying at Colorado, though, and I also agree. I think they're going to have a down year. I just think long term there's a lot of potential there for them to build if we can get close. If the closest we might get to a Big 12 dynasty, I think there's a lot of reason to think it could be Colorado. But Chris, you know who else it might end up being? Texas Tech. If the talent they're landing in the transfer portal can come together on the field, this could be the Red Raiders year coming up with what Texas Tech has been able to build. We are going to talk about the roster they have assembled in the transfer portal in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes and Locked On Texas Tech is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. This message is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it even easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least two players, and if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. For me, I'm taking all the hot takes this weekend. I'm looking at, in Prize Picks, Lamar Jackson, more than 250 passing yards. Think he's going to have a big day against Buffalo. And I also think Travis Kelce is going to go off against the Texans for more than 70 receiving yards. It's fun to predict and easy to play. Plus, with Prize Picks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And with the app, you'll get your winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game today. All right, Chris, everyone in the Big 12 is trying to compete with the top dogs, the SEC, the Big 10. Although at least when it comes to landing good talent in the transfer portal, so far only Texas Tech's been able to do it. You are the only Big 12 team with a top 10 transfer portal class, and you guys rank third right now. And as someone for Utah, that's the hope and the goal, right? Is to be able to assemble and land elite talent. I don't think Utah is ever quite going to be able to land a top 3 class, but I am curious, how in the world has Texas Tech gone about adding this much talent? I mean, I saw rumors you were in on Carson Beck. You didn't land him, but the fact you were in on him, just one of the teams is crazy.
How many, by the way, how many guys did Utah add in the portal to this point? How many have they added?
I think they added 15 at least, and it might even be more than that. I know for a fact they have like 30 new faces. I think it's 15 in the portal.
Okay, who's the top guy that they added?
I would say Wayshawn Parker, the Washington State running back. He was really good last year for the Cougars. He was a 4-star addition, but that was the only 4-star they were able to get.
Okay. Yeah, I first of all, Texas Tech, they haven't really been they were close to being in the conference title game this year. They were one win away. If you'd have won one more conference game, you would have been in Arlington based on the tiebreakers, because you did beat Arizona State and you did beat Iowa State. And you didn't play BYU and all that, but it just needed one more. You needed one more win to get there. And since this league's, since it's been around, you've never made it to the league title game since they started playing that. And I think people around here, you've been good, you've been relevant, but you've never gotten over the hump. And the closest was 2008. That was the Graham Harrell, Michael Crabtree. You beat Texas, but then Oklahoma smoked you, and you were in the Big 12 South, and you got in this weird tiebreaker scenario to where it just didn't work out in your favor, and Oklahoma and Texas benefit. Shocker. So I think people around here are like, okay, these are the rules. This is what we're allowed to do. You've been really trying to hammer away at the high school classes, and that's what Joey McGuire was really hired to do, was improve the recruiting aspect. But I think you're ready to graduate from that, and you're trying to, I don't want to say like people are impatient, but I think you're just trying to take advantage of the rules that are currently that we are under. And so they got really aggressive, and they got really aggressive and quickly. They have a personnel department that is about 5 to 6 people deep, that is headed up by James Blanchard, who USC has tried to hire away, Notre Dame has tried to hire away, and he keeps getting his contract renewed and doubled and all these things. So he's one of the up and comers in that space in the country. But a lot of this is analytics based. A lot of this is PFF based. A lot of this is a lot of studying and measurables and all the stuff, because I think what kept you from being in Arlington last year was you weren't big enough up front on either ones of the line of scrimmage. And so you signed 18 portal guys, but and I do think there was some finances involved. There's no doubt. I mean, there's a lot of oil money and a lot of people that donated to the cause, because I think the rules are about to change again, but not yet. And so I think that you try to take advantage of, and I was most excited about a lot of the guys that they added, because there's about half the class are multi-year guys. They're not just here for 1 year, but they signed 7 linemen, 3 on offense, 4 on defense. I mean, you go and sign a second team all Big 12 defensive tackle and the Hunter kid from UCF. You sign, Southern Illinois' best defensive tackle. You sign a phenomenal player from the University of Houston. That was, because Houston's problem was not defense. Shout out to Parker Ainsworth. And so that's what I was most excited about, is what they did up front, because we could talk about QBs and running backs and all this stuff. How this is going to go is how you go in the trenches. And shockingly, they still won 8 games last year, being pretty darn average up front. And I think that's what really they tried to address. But, yeah, there's a lot of bells and whistles with this portal class for sure.
Yeah, and we talked about the NIL aspect of it a little bit, right? Like everyone is using NIL right now. Utah got wrapped up in a big NIL thing recently, and the reason Utah is able to land a guy like Wayshawn Parker, like, yes, it helps that you hired the Washington State running backs coach to now be your running back coach. That definitely helps, but you also have to be able to pony up, because guys, they want to go, and some things about college football haven't changed, right? You still want to go where you have a great chance to win and have your skills developed to reach the NFL level. But what's the whole point of getting to the NFL? To getting paid. You can also get paid right now based on those skill sets. So you see guys make those decisions. So you have to have a strong NIL collective. And I do not think Utah is ever, as I mentioned before, I just don't think Utah is ever going to have the ability to land a top 5 transfer portal class. But what I do think a team like Utah can do is develop and recruit the right players in just in general in college football. They can plug a spot or 2 in the transfer portal, but recruiting and developing is what allowed Utah in the past to beat the USC and Oregons in Pac-12 championship games. I think that's how Utah is going to have to do it, because once again, I just don't see how Utah is going to ever have the NIL resources to have a top 5 transfer portal class. And that's where, but if you can recruit, develop your guys, and at least make any offer that comes their way competitive, they're going to want to stay if they feel like they got a chance to win and get their skills developed to the next level. So I feel like that's Utah's hope, is continuing to kind of recruit and develop. And as you mentioned, Chris, it feels like that's something for Texas Tech too. Just because you're getting these good players in the portal doesn't mean you just abandon and stop recruiting at the highest level of high school, because having homegrown guys still has a lot of value.
Yeah, because Texas Tech has typically been a bit of a developmental program, I think, like Utah and all that. And I think that Joey really wanted to supplement with the portal. And he even said late November, early December, we're going to get 8 to 12 guys. And I just think as it started happening, and one thing that needs to be mentioned here is I think Texas Tech has a pristine reputation for paying exactly what they say they're going to do and pay on time and all that. I think not everybody else has that reputation. And I mention that because I think the agents that are running a lot of this or trying to help kids funnel this or that, the agents were in a position, I think, in some ways to help Texas Tech, because they're like, hey, man, if you go here, they're going to pay you what they say. They're going to give it to you on time. And they're going to follow through with their promise or whatever it is, whatever deal you come up with the collective. And I think that's worth something too. So that certainly helped. And that's that's where a lot of the Carson Beck stuff came in. That was a lot of agent-driven discussion. But again, that's not a bad thing when your name is being mentioned out there in the ether in a top portal candidate like Carson Beck was. But because you have a top portal class, you're guaranteed nothing. This stuff is hard.
Ole Miss didn't make the college football playoff. I thought they were going to waltz in with that portal class.
And they got close, but you don't lose to Kentucky, Lane. Come on, Coach Kiffin, don't lose to Kentucky. But the challenge that everybody's got, and Coach Whittingham, everybody's going to have the same issues. How do we mesh these pieces together and gel and have a culture? Everybody's got a culture within their locker room, okay? Some good, some bad, but everybody's got one. But how do you get everybody on the same page without much time to do so and care about each other and not check out if things don't go well? Because what's interesting is look at the two teams playing in the national championship game right now, and they both were booed at home unmercifully and had devastating losses, and yet they're playing for the whole thing. And that's what's kind of crazy is nobody's rolling through these seasons anymore. It just doesn't exist. But you need depth and you need talent, and you need, in a lot of cases, you need age, experience. And I think that's what Texas Tech tried to secure. Now, did they guess right on the culture part and bring the right kind of guys in? That's what they hoped they did, because they were tried to be very careful about that aspect. But that's because one bad apple, man, can ruin that pie big time, and you're trying not to do that, even though you like a lot of talent, measurables, and all those things.
I mentioned Ole Miss in the transfer portal. How about what happened with Florida State? I mean, oh my gosh, talk about bringing in a bad mix of players, and you see they go from undefeated to one of the worst teams in Power 4 college football, which is a sentence that didn't even sound fathomable at the start of the year, and that's how it ends up playing out. And Utah has that same thing. They brought in a transfer portal quarterback with how important that position is. Is that going to click, and does it all gel together? This is the most dependent I think Utah will be on a transfer portal class yet. And I'm very curious to see how that works out for Utah, and Texas Tech is going to be in a similar position. One thing that Texas Tech is not in a similar position with Utah is they have the most valuable college athletic program in the Big 12, according to CNBC. Want to talk with Chris about that, as well as get his thoughts on the Utah-BYU matchup coming up this weekend, one of the best rivalries in the Big 12. And as Chris has gotten a chance to call both of those games, see what he thinks of each program, we're going to be discussing that in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes and Locked On Texas Tech is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. You can just visit FanDuel.com today to join today, and it'll get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sports partner of the NFL. And speaking of the NFL, what a weekend of divisional games we have coming up. It's always one of the best weekends of the year. It's not even just because of the divisional games. We also get the national championship on Monday night. Notre Dame, Ohio State. Which QB is going to come out on top? Which team? Which program? It's for the biggest one of them all. Also, NBA, NHL, college basketball, NFL. FanDuel has you covered. Once again, you can get started with $300 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com today. All right, Chris, I want to ask you about some Big 12 basketball in a moment here, but first, just really when this broke, I don't know who I would have guessed because wouldn't have gone recently biased with Colorado, but still seeing Texas Tech as the most valuable college athletic program in the Big 12, it did surprise me. I didn't expect it to be Utah. I like I said, I really don't know who I probably would have guessed. Maybe a Kansas. I don't know. But why do you think it is that Texas Tech is at the top? And do you make much of this? How much stock do you put in it? Do you think it's a big thing? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they tried to factor in a whole bunch of things there, and how they came up with the number. I'm not, super certain. There was a lengthy formula based on a variety of things. And the only thing that I think you can take away from this, what meaning does this potentially have? because none of these departments are for sale. I mean, it's not like you're going to sell, hey, the Texas Tech athletic department is on the market. Like, but I do think it potentially matters if you ever get into the private equity stuff as a league. Like this is tangible data, whether the firm, says that or not. I mean, this is an unbiased study and a formula that was put together based on a variety of different things. And so that's the only thing that I think could really, for our purposes, matter. Look, I mean, there's a lot of money flowing through Texas Tech, but they're not alone there. I mean, Baylor's got a ton of money. TCU has a ton of money. Yeah, Kansas has a ton of money. You just don't have a lot of the TV revenue coming in to these institutions, Utah included, compared to some of the folks in the SEC and the Big Ten, obviously. And that's so you're trying to, but they just finished a $250 million addition to their stadium here. That is a brand new football complex. I mean, facility wise, and I'm starting to see what every institution has and what I think Texas Tech, I mean, TCU stuff is really nice.
Yes,
but Texas Tech stuff is really, really good. And they have because to some of their donors, they weren't interested in the NIL stuff. They wanted brick and mortar. They were like, I want to put my name on something that will be here for the next 50 to 100 years. So they didn't skimp at all with this new South End Zone football complex, and it's fun. It's got everything you could. They looked at Bama and Oregon and Clemson and everything, and they try to cobble all these ideas together and come up with something that. And I'm in it all the time. It's impressive. Now, does that help you win a football game? I don't know. Does it help you land the top portal class or one of them? I don't know if it does or not. They just spent. I think $30 million on a basketball practice-only facility that they finished. I want to say, because I mean, I was in Salt Lake City, and we're going to get to that. And we went to the Utah Jazz facility to practice one day on a Sunday morning in between games. And I'm walking around there, and I think somebody came up to us and they go, "This isn't near as nice as our place is." And I'm like, "Not even close," wow. And so that's. But again, what is that worth? Does that even factor into this study? I have no idea. But it was interesting. I don't know if I would have guessed Texas Tech was the most valuable. 33rd in the country, though. That's not necessarily a great thing. But yeah, what did they attach it? Like it was like $640-something million is what it's worth. But again, it's not for sale, not that I'm aware of, so it doesn't really matter.
I did not have you making the Utah Jazz fans angry on my my bingo card for tonight, by the way.
I love the Jazz. I think Michael Jordan pushed off without a doubt.
There you go.
Yeah. So I'm just talking facility wise, and I'm talking about the practice facility, not the arena or anything like that. I'm talking about just the practice facility. It looked like it had, but again, Texas Tech didn't even have this for years. It was one of the only schools in the Big 12 that had no such thing, and they desperately needed it. But they had a donor. It was like, this is important, and he largely paid for it.
Mm-hmm. To your point, by the way, on is it important for those end zones and stuff? Maybe in the grand scheme of things, not 100%, but also say this, we've all been in high school, when you go to those college atmospheres and you get goosebumps, and you just get anything you can do to enhance your game day experience, impress those recruits that are on campus, make them want to be part of your program. I do think helps and enhances your program. So I do think that's a good decision by Texas Tech, and Utah renovated their end zone recently. I think it's improved their game day experience. It's been a positive thing too. So one thing Utah might consider renovating eventually is the Huntsman Center. It's been around a little bit. It's a very historic venue. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird played back there when they were in college. Appreciate you making the time to stop by and come on. Make sure you guys keep it up with Chris's work at Locked On Texas Tech, and you'll be able to hear him on the call of the Red Raiders game this weekend. Chris, thanks for coming on.
Keep hope alive, people. We'll talk to you everybody next time. JT, thanks for having me on. You're very nice to do this for us.
Appreciate it, Chris. You're a man. All righty. That is going to do it for our show, Locked On Utes and Locked On Texas Tech. We'll be back with you next time.